Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular town council meeting for Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018. Please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Fishbein?
Here.
Laffin?
Here.
Letourneau?
Here.
Marone?
Here.
Morgenstein?
Here.
Shortell?
Here.
Testa? Zandri? Chairman Cervoni.
Here. Councilor Testa did tell me that he might be running late tonight, and Councilor Zandri told me that he did have a work obligation that precluded his attendance. On to item 3.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve or accept consent agenda items A through P, R, and S.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda passes with the exception of item Q. Mr. Vice Chairman.
I move we approve a bid waiver exemption for the purchasing ordinance to allow the Wallingford 350th Jubilee Parade Committee to contact various groups to participate in the 350th Jubilee Parade Committee.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do we have representatives from the Jubilee or parade or otherwise? Good evening. If you could just remind us who you are for the record.
John J. Sullivan, Chairman, Jubilee Parade.
Jonathan Chappell, Vice Chair. One of.
Good evening. Just tell us a little bit about your request.
So we are obviously in charge of putting together a nice parade to celebrate Wallingford's birthday, 350th birthday. Sorry.
Closer to the mic, please. Thank you.
Sorry. And in doing so, we're going to have several, perhaps, costs, some which may implicate the threshold of the bidding ordinance. And, for instance, a band. Some of them have fees that are relatively high because they can command such a fee and be in parades such as ours. Some of these bands or other talent require quick turnaround action, and we have to have the ability to say yes and use funds that were allocated to us in the budget. And we'll also be seeking private donations to hopefully offset some or all, even all, of the ultimate cost of the parade. So to the extent the bid process might be required, and I stress the might, we want to get a waiver now before that day comes, because it'll be hard to get on a calendar and have a decision by the council in time that we can say yes and make a commitment to get talent or other things for the parade.
All right, thank you. Councilor Morgenstein, this was your item.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Certainly, we're all looking forward to a great celebration. So remind us all the allocated amount that would be over what a bid waiver would. So the amount that would require a bid, if you could just refresh our memory as to that.
It's in your ordinances. $7,500.
Okay.
Is the threshold.
So if you were looking towards a band or a pyrotechnics or a something that was over 7,500, this was familiar to me because it was nice you guys presented to us at budget time, and the statement was made that we're looking to do a big celebration, we're looking to bring in good talent, we don't want to be curtailed in our ability to get what we want for our 4-hour parade and this whole big celebration. One of the questions that I had, and perhaps it's for the mayor or the comptroller, what is the amount of money in total that the town plans to fund for this 2020 event?
I believe it's $45,000 in the next, the budget that will begin July 1st. There's $7,500 thus far in general for the celebration. What additional amounts, I don't know. I haven't had any discussions with anyone. It's expected to be a significant amount over what is budgeted at this point, but I don't have any details.
That was what I was kind of looking for. Did we perhaps expect that we were looking to allocate another $45,000 in the 1920 budget?
It depends upon the economy, it depends upon a multitude of factors, and what experience the parade committee is having in attracting what they need as far as talent and groups. So there are a lot of evaluation must occur before we'll reach that conclusion.
And I figured as much, but I just wanted to have a general sense of, did we have a threshold above which we would not go? And it sounds like we just don't know because of the economy. Yeah. So the other question, and again, it might be more the governmental side rather than you guys, money for staffing and overtime and those sorts of things, is that part of the $45,000 that we're financing, or is that coming more out of the budget of the police and the fire themselves? Is that separate from the amount that you're putting forward towards this event?
No money has been budgeted,
But there's certainly going to
but
occur
there will be
expenses
costs.
for those things.
We'll have to take a look at that when the time comes. That would be a question for the budget for the 2021 fiscal year.
Right, but my recollection when we were doing things like fireworks was that there were certainly costs, overtime and such. So I'm just trying to look at the whole big picture here. So this idea, which I've certainly heard before, of, we just have to be able to not go in for bids because we're going to be in a hurry. I'm just not so sure that, are we looking for a blanket bid waiver? So if I had one bid next week and I had 4 bids in July and I had 6 bids in December, is what you're looking for a bid waiver blanket for the whole event?
Let me take it back a notch. First of all, to the mayor's point, we are not going to sit around and hope that the
Oh, and I
town-
realize you're looking, I'm sorry, yeah, because I know you're trying to get the money back, yeah, and I appreciate that, I'm sorry, yeah.
So I'll continue that we have a sponsorship package available to all, including businesses, families, and individuals, and any donation goes towards the parade committee will offset dollar-to-dollar town spending. So let me be clear that if we go out tomorrow and someone is willing to fund the entire event, we'll be giving back the town's money. We're not looking to spend taxpayer money. Unfortunately, it's a big cost event, and this town deserves a 350th birthday party parade, and that may end up costing the town some money. We hope it does not. The sponsorship form has been finalized and created, and we're starting to disseminate it. We have sponsorship levels at gold, silver, and bronze, which is $5,000 25 and 1,000 respectively. We also have opportunities for what we've entitled targeted sponsorships. So if you want to sponsor all the bottled water or the hydration stations that were going to be required, we'll find a way to negotiate and let you do so, an in-kind sponsorship, if you will. But we'll also take any check. We'll take a $5 bill if you're willing to give it. But we've created a level at $100 for people to be friends of the parade, and you may get a scroll on the website, Facebook page, or otherwise. As far as a blanket bid waiver, I will say, and I'm an attorney, so I'm careful, I don't like the word blanket because it implies that we are going to meet the threshold and that the bid ordinance would even apply to certain expenditures. The example I put is a lot of our costs are going to be under $7,500, hopefully, and very likely. For those that go over, for instance, if we got a so-called big ticket band who needed $7,500 or more, or certain groups that march in these parades, such as West Point, they may require, through travel and otherwise, expenditures of $7,500 or more. We don't want to have to come to the council, no offense, for a bid waiver at that time, nor do we want to go through the bidding process, because frankly, if we landed a gig like that, West Point, there is no comparison. So it would not be the bidding process would not do the purpose to save the town money. What it would do is preclude us from getting such an act into the parade. So I understand the reason for bids and certain commodities. Yes, it's going to save taxpayer money. If everyone is offering you the same bottle of water and you can get it for 5 cents cheaper from Corporation A versus Corporation B, then you pick A. I don't see that it's, and I'm deferring to actually Corporation Counsel as well as the council, but I don't know, frankly, if we would need that many bids anyway. Sorry for the length.
No, so I just, again, looking for clarification and partly looking for, the town moving forward's commitment as well, which it sounds like is still up in the air. So I wanted to simply have a discussion. Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Councilor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen. So I'm looking at the bid ordinance, and you would agree with me that if the estimated cost is less than $7,500, you can inquire. So I guess one way to deal with this is perhaps to inquire, which you're not prevented from doing, and once you get to that point, then we talk about a waiver. Usually when we deal with something like this, I'm trying to think back when we've done these kinds of things. Remember the police department came to us because they've been doing business with Motorola and they wanted to continue on, and they had some general costs. So we sort of said, yeah, we're comfortable because we have some numbers. But my concern here is that, West Point, commendable, all of that. And, their number is $50,000, just to throw a number out there. And then, this thing just gets bigger and bigger. My understanding is there's not a restricted list. You're not saying we want to approach these 4 entities, right? Is that fair?
We, to be honest, we're so early in the process that the invitations, I think, are going out around July. So we won't know who would even be willing to come until probably some part of the summer.
And once again, nothing prevents those invitations from going out.
Correct.
And do you know how many groups you're sending invites to?
If I may, Chappie, it's not about What it's about is simply this. A band like West Point, we're going to use that as the example. If we miss an opportunity, they're booked somewhere else and we're done. And we're not going to get West Point. And you know in the summer, you meet once a month by and large for a couple of months there. So unless you want to come in for a special meeting, we would like the waiver. Now, look, I've been around a long time. I'm not about to fritter away town money or spend it the wrong way. I'm concerned just as much as each one of you are with the dollars attached to this. And for those reasons, we've tried to come up with a very good package for sponsorships to do our best to reduce the costs. But this is a 350th celebration. Yes, we have grandiose plans to celebrate. Is it going to cost money? Absolutely, Counselor. You know that. It's a cost item by and large, unless we can get some sponsorships. But we don't want to miss an opportunity. And believe me, it's 7,500 or more than 7,500. We're going to be very choosy who we bring in here. It's not going to, we're not settling. We're going to be very targeted on who we bring in. And once we do that, once we determine who we want and the invitations are sent, it's still going to be up to the board to determine if we are going to spend that money. So it's not a matter of $7,500, $20,000. It's just going to be good financial management of town resources and town funds. So,
I respect all of that. You know, some of my concerns are the first, and, you know, I read minutes when they come to me. And, you know, we brought this up during the budget. I've looked at the minutes and all of that stuff for the 2020 group. And the first that I knew that we were talking about an expenditure, at least in this budget, of $45,000 was when I got the mayor's budget. And there wasn't a letter in there. There was no backup. I didn't know where that number came from. And I started to look at it. You know, and then we go through the budget process and I find out that there is no budget per se. You know, I think if you were here today with like a list of 4 groups that you wanted to approach, I think I'd feel a little bit more comfortable, but, you know,
well, let me, Craig, may I?
Absolutely.
Look, we have no money right now. We will have no money till July. We have a budget, it has no money in it. All we have are disbursement and receipt categories on left and on right. I have no money. Matter of fact, I shelled out $100 of my own money just to get us a web domain. Money I know I won't get back because I have made a purchase before the new budget went into effect. But these are the things we as volunteers are trying to do to make sure we have a successful parade. I told you last time I was here, I would come before this council quarterly and present a financial report, tell you where we are. There will be honesty and integrity and open reporting on this parade committee. We realize the investment of $45,000 in this budget year is considerable, especially in the economic times we're in. Will we be coming back next year for more money? Possibly we will. Possibly we will. But to the mayor's point, he's going to have to make a determination on how much he can give us if we need more, based on the economic times and how, you know, where is the town financially? So, I mean, from a budget standpoint, yeah, we have a disbursements, receipts. Chappie and I sat down. We have an Excel spreadsheet with categories for expenditures. But right now, again, there's no money in it. As a matter of fact, we're down $100 that I know I'll never get back.
So that's an accounting as to, you know, what's going on. What I'm talking about a budget is, you know, any group that I'm involved with, this is our goal to raise. This is where we anticipate spending it. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, we can show you, the categories will show you, and I'm sorry not to interrupt you, but the categories will show you where we intend on spending it. But as far as revenue, we don't know what we're going to be able to generate. When we took this over, it wasn't so much about fundraising, more than organizing a parade, which alone is a gigantic task. I can't tell you how big it is. And I've got a couple of my committee members here, Dawn Lindauer's here too. But every step we take, tomorrow's another meeting, it just opens more doors as to either cost structure, logistics. This is a huge undertaking, and we're only 3 months into this, honestly. So I think it's premature to say you don't have a budget, you don't have this. We have no money right now.
with all due respect, I think at the very first meeting, I mean, anytime I've been involved with things, you put together some sort of budget. So then I look at the letter that we have, the one page of backup for this, and it says in there, while most participants will be at no cost to the town of Wallingford. I mean, right now, the town of Wallingford, with the budget and the prior expenditure, we're into it for $50,000. So, well, 7,500.
We didn't get any of that 7,500.
Well,
That went to the Jubilee Committee, not us. The parade is a separate line item. Well, it's 45,000 separate in the budget for just the parade.
To the entire thing. Okay, so you're just talking about the parade, because this is not, this letterhead is from the entire committee. So, you know, however you sub, the taxpayers have given 7,500 and then anticipate 4,500. I know there's been some internal fundraising also, which hasn't been that much. So, you know, I think there will be a cost, but I'm just, as I said, if you had a list of 4 groups that you wanted to approach, I'd be more comfortable. But this blanket sort of situation, you know, we can have a special meeting, and I have never declined having a special meeting over the summer. So I'm ready, willing, and able to do whatever we need to do as a body to help you guys out. But
Well, then give us the blanket and you don't, that's helping us out. That's helping us out. You just said you do anything to help us out. There it is. You put it out there yourself.
I think if I had a budget, then I would be a lot more comfortable. So, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Councilor Morone?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is a monstrous undertaking that you guys are taking on. I just want to say thank you as volunteers for jumping into this. You're not getting paid. We've seen you now twice as much as we see most of the department heads in a year. You know, and we manage a $160 million budget. So I just want to say thanks a lot for taking this on. This is a huge project, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
Councilor Testa?
Thank you. Excuse my tardiness. It was wet, but
I already did.
we won.
Congratulations.
Well, the first one, the second game just started. You know, we have purchasing ordinances in the first place in the interest of propriety. We also have a process for providing bid waivers in the interest of common sense sometimes. Otherwise, if there was never a need for it, the process wouldn't be there. Now, a situation like this, we're kind of all in this together. You're handling a certain part of this in a certain way because that's how it has to be done for propriety's sake in general. When it comes to what you're trying to do, what they're asking for here, you can't. I don't even see. I don't see the possibility of impropriety in the first place. In the second place, the request is reasonable because we agree to bid waivers when we don't have a question as to the integrity of either the process and or the people involved in it. And I don't think that's a situation where we have any question. But there is a possibility that by not granting it, we're going to impede just the process itself. We're going to impede their ability to do the best job they can on our behalf. And when we worry about bid waivers or we worry about the propriety of a purchasing process, we worry, well, who's going to do what? Who are they going to hire? What's going to happen? Well, you're asking for a break in how you're going to procure people. And then we would think to ourselves, well, how are we going to know who they are? It's not like you're going to parade them in front of us. See what I did there? We're going to know who they all are. And we're going to at least acknowledge at that time, well, how much were they? You're going to be reporting back. If we see anything glaring, it's not going to be the process that's going to be the problem. It's going to be the fact that you went ahead and did it. And it's not going to be, and so that's not going to happen. We're going to see all of this. So for that reason, those reasons, I would think that this is beyond a reasonable request. And I think giving them a hard time about it, sometimes you're just dealing with things that benefit the community as a whole, involving people that are a part of the community. And I think giving them a hard time about how they're trying to proceed is just not very neighborly. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councilor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I can't think of a time, and I've been up here 9 years, where we have allowed a waiver without an identified individual. Without saying, we have a relationship with X, we want to continue that, we just want to deal with them. We've never done that before. This is totally different. And I think even in those cases, we've allowed for an RFP at some level. We're not even hearing that. What we're hearing is, and I don't see a portion of our ordinance that allows just us to waive any procedure. And that's what I'm hearing here tonight. Ultimately, I don't know who is the gatekeeper here. Are we, on behalf of the taxpayers? Who's going to contract with these individuals? So, I guess that's a question. Are you going to come back to, I'd feel comfortable if you came back to us and said, hey, this is what we got. These are the amounts, and do it together. I would have no problem with that. But to let the horse out of the barn and just, yeah,
Sorry to cut you off.
no problem. We're
If the
discussing.
council would like, the council can take over the whole reins to the show. You need to understand one thing. This money is not going into a special bank account that only John and I have signature authority on. The money's going to the town hall. It's going to be in a memo that says something along the lines of 350 parade, and the town is our accountant and custodian of our money. So therefore, there are no checks, certainly not coming from the Chapel household. The checks will be written on an account from the town hall. I do not have, nor do I want, signature authority on town checks. And so we can make a requisition just like another department may do from time to time. And if the money's there, yes, Mr. Bose and the purchasing agent will be involved in the process to say the money is there and the expenditure goes out and they'll account for that expenditure. There's no
So who's
private
going
hands holding the cash other than to deliver it to town hall perhaps.
so who's going to sign the contract? Is it your group, your entity that we created? Because like with the fireworks, I think it's Park and Rec that signs the contract, if I recall correctly.
Mayor? Yeah, I believe it'd be the purchasing agent would sign for the town upon the recommendation of the committee.
So the entity itself would be making the recommendation as to who they wanted.
We would be taking a vote and saying, yes, we want. And then we have not worked out the kinks on how we're going to do this, but we will, I assure you, figure out how to make the appropriate requisition to get the contracted party, if you will, paid.
So I guess my offer was to collaborate, or is to have the committee come to us once you've done your fact-finding and all of that stuff, and have some sort of discussion, and you're unwilling to do that.
We are unwilling to do that. We are unwilling to do that. I told you I'd be here quarterly. We will work as a team, and we will determine who we are going to have in the parade. And believe me, we will send invitations to organizations that will return those invitations, say, we'd love to, here's our fee, and we will make a determination, sorry, it's cost prohibitive. You cannot be in our parade. It happened in 1970, it happened in 1995. I have a book here in front of me from the 150th anniversary, it happened then. We understand the financial responsibilities on our shoulders. We have $45,000, and you know, I sat up there 8 years and was a custodian of town funds, and not once did I ever not have the taxpayers of this town utmost in my mind when I made decisions.
So, and that would be, I don't need the back and forth on that one, but I'm not hearing that $45,000 is the cap here, and that's the problem. If you were saying that, but I'm, the last time, John, you were here, you said, I wanted $100,000.
That's right, I did.
Yeah, and we don't know that that's the cap, and
Oh, hold on, Craig.
what?
Mayor?
Yeah, I think, the cap right now is 45,000,
Right.
but they need to develop information. They could end up with a deposit situation where a band wants a deposit now to commit to the date, and then when they arrive, they get the final payment. There are all kinds of ramifications that occur. Until they get into that, we're just not going to know the details. They know that right now it's 45. Now, if they really get a band they really want and it requires a certain deposit, then they'll be saying, gee, can we do this with the expectation that the rest of the money is forthcoming? There's so many variables here, but we need them to scout this territory and tell us what it looks like, and the 45,000, I think, is a reasonable sum to get this going.
But is there a portion of the ordinance as it presently exists that prevents them from sending out the invitation and prevents them from getting the information?
Well, I think the difficulty there is that, or not, it's not a difficulty, but they don't want to making choices based upon dollars alone. It's not trying to get the lowest amount of money. You're dealing with what is the talent, what is the fame, perhaps some of the groups, and you have to weigh that against what the cost is. I don't know how you put that out in an RFP, weighing those intangibles. A well-known group would be someone they'd be more apt to want to attract at least one than have all smaller known entities. It may be very good, but if you're trying to make a big splash, it is about publicity and people knowing the various groups who are in a parade. So it's, in a way, it's not quite, but it's artistry. How do you construct something that will be attractive, that will encourage people to be excited and part of it? And bidding doesn't fit well with that because there's a lot of analysis and review and just planning that has to occur before you're going to make final decisions.
So the question was whether or not the existing ordinance precludes them from sending out an invite. Nothing stops the group from sending a letter to Bruce Springsteen's management company. We're having a parade. About how much would you charge to, whatever, or West Point or nothing. There's nothing in the ordinance that prevents that right now.
There's nothing that prevents that. Whether that is a difficult process for them as volunteers to do all of that additional advance work rather than choosing what ones they want and seeing what the response is, that's really a factor here. How much time can be spent? There's a lot of correspondence and other issues surrounding going out in that manner. Can it be done? Well, I suppose it can be done, but I think they're saying they don't have the staff to do it, and they want to keep it as clean and simple as possible, which is allowed by the bid waiver.
And I know you're talking marching band, bad example. But that's what I'm hearing, is they can't do that without this waiver, that they cannot reach out to get those estimates without us acting. And I don't see that in the ordinance at all. So why?
I
don't understand your question.
I would just be clear that I nor anyone else I believe spoke and said we can't send an invitation. The worry is when the answer to that invitation is, tell me within a week, and by the way, it'll cost $10,000, we need the ability to say yes, and I'm not willing to put in this effort, to be frank, and not have some threshold leash. And I think a pretty good leash is the fact that the town is controlling the parade checking account. And we have to report, or we've committed to report back to you every quarter, and we will do so. we also have email addresses, we have cell phones, we have home lines. If you have a question, Craig, I'm willing at all times, to answer it to the best I can. But what I'm not willing to do, and I know my friend here is not willing to do, is to come to every meeting and beg and steal. So we need some leash, yes. Maybe out of the ordinary, but it's the 350th parade, and I don't think we're having a 351st. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I don't see how you would need to come to every meeting, but whatever. Janice?
It's not appropriate to ask potential vendors what they will charge for a service to the town, and then turn around and tell them, oh, by the way, now that you've told us, we're going to go out to bid, and your price quote is now public knowledge. That is not an appropriate purchasing procedure. You are being asked to waive the bid for the service, which is the hiring of talent. If you think the hiring of talent can go out to bid, then I guess you don't give them a bid waiver, but that's what you're talking about. And as I'm sure everybody knows, talent, particularly good talent, books well over a year in advance, and you need to take the opportunity when it's presented to you. But you're being asked to waive the bidding of the service, which is hiring of talent. That's what you're being asked to do.
But don't we usually do an RFP in that situation?
I wouldn't do it for talent, no. What are you going to say?
What I said was, don't we usually do an RFP in that situation?
How often do we hire talent?
No. When we waive a bid, we don't just throw out the book. We have some sort of procedure.
We don't necessarily know. The RFP process is part of our purchasing ordinance, and if you use the RFP process in accordance with the ordinance, you don't need a bid waiver. It's part of the purchasing ordinance. So for example, you did give, and I probably shouldn't even mention this because it'll probably get us into trouble, you gave the law department a bid waiver to hire appraisers during the course of the next fiscal year. We're going to make a judgment in a particular case of choosing a particular appraiser. We certainly weigh price as part of that, but we're really looking for qualifications. I have a bid waiver. I did not tell you who those appraisers are because I don't know. Maybe I won't need them, but you gave me a blanket bid waiver so that I can make a judgment what appraiser is appropriate for what circumstance. That's what you're done. This is so unique. This is talent. This is making a subjective choice over what type of talent you want in a parade. I mean, the question is, are you going to put that out to bid? Because if the answer is yes, we're going to put that out to bid. God bless them. I suspect they may resign at that point, but so be it. But that's really what you're being asked here, waiving the bidding of the service, which is entertainment.
So with the police, with Motorola, we allowed the police department to get ideas on what it would cost. Because they came to us and said, waive the...
They argued that it was proprietary. They were already in with Motorola, correct? That was already part of this. There are unique circumstances in a variety of categories. This is entertainment.
Understood.
I mean, if you don't think if it fits into a certain...
This is entertainment with no information.
Well, then run the parade.
No,
I mean, seriously.
That's having
have the council run the parade.
That's what a child would do.
I'm not a child, I can assure you, and that is what you are saying. I kind of want you to do this, but I want final say over what you're going to pick.
I didn't ask anybody to do this.
That really is what you're saying.
But we don't have, an appraiser is something which is a good example, but appraisers charge, on a commercial appraisal, you're talking $3,000, on a residential $350, right? We're talking perhaps tens of thousands of dollars without a list. I mean, I have no idea who, other than West Point, that's the only group, and we have a reference to the mummers here. I have no idea, and, we're talking about a blanket.
So.
I got it.
Is it going
I
out
see
to
what-
bid?
No, I'm not suggesting going out to bid.
Well, then they would be entitled to a bid waiver.
No, you could do an RFP, but anyway,
All right, that's my 2 cents.
okay.
And then some. Counselor Shortell.
Call the question.
All right, there's been an motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I think that was all aye. Madam Clerk, would you please call the vote?
Thank you. Fishbein,
No.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
Absolutely yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein.
Yes?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni,
Yes.
and the motion passes.
Thank you for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Next is item 5.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe you have a letter,
On item 5?
yes, a letter from my office regarding property owned by Robert and Joan Rancourt, who are here. It's over 60 acres of property that has been well-maintained. Much of it is open space, beautiful property. A pond is on the property, all kinds of wildlife. They've been absolute wonderful stewards, really looking to preserve the rural, the natural beauty of Wallingford and encouraging the wildlife. Part of the property is crossed by a CL&P easement. That provides a wildlife corridor which would allow wildlife to traverse over that through the rest of Wallingford, really. It's a wonderful example of people who want to really allow something that they've dedicated their lives to, that is the preservation, the beautification of not only their own property, but the town they live in, to perpetuate that. And in order to achieve that, they're offering to the town a restrictive easement that we would be in a position to enforce, to have that property be preserved according to the terms of the prescriptive easement. And obviously, the benefits are the rural beauty, the wildlife, and testimony that people in town are really wonderful stewards of where they live, and their willingness to have this continue to be a benefit to the community is outstanding. So that is what is before us.
Thank you. Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the declaration and grant of a permanent conservation easement of open space property located at 190 New Cheshire Road.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mayor, do you want your letter read into the record, or?
Sure, that's fine.
Wallingford Town Council, attention Vincent Cervoni, Chairman. Dear council members, it is with great pleasure that I submit to the Town Council for acceptance a declaration and grant of permanent conservation easement in favor of the town of Wallingford with respect to approximately 47.37 acres of land owned by Mr. and Mrs. Robert J. and Joan T. Rancourt at 190 New Cheshire Road. Mr. and Mrs. Rancourt approached the town with their desire to permanently protect a portion of their property, keeping it in its natural state in perpetuity. Working with Mr. and Mrs. Rancourt and their 3 children, the town engineer developed a map which breaks the property.
Mr. Chairman, I think you have a previous letter.
Oh. Is there a newer, shorter one?
I just want to make sure that the acreage is accurate. That says 47, it's actually, there are 3 pieces, they total over 60 acres. Sorry.
All right. I'll read the corrected version, and I'll start where I left off, because it explains what the breakdown of the acreage is. Working with Mr. Rancourt and their children, the town engineer developed a map which breaks the property into 3 areas. Area A, approximately 2.17 acres, will remain a residential use. Area B, approximately 12.39 acres, plus a pond and land within Connecticut Light and Power right-of-way, will permit agricultural landscaping activities. Area C, approximately 47.41 acres, a generally forested area, will be preserved in its natural state. By accepting this conservation restriction, the town of Wallingford would legally be entitled to seek enforcement of the restrictions set forth in the declaration. To be clear, the property will not be available for public use. Its purpose is to permanently preserve the forested area and protect it in its natural state and restrict the uses of the remaining land. The open space acreage is a diverse habitat with upland area, mature trees, and a beautiful pond. There is ample evidence of wildlife, including deer, turkeys, foxes, coyotes, white squirrels, and many bird species. A CL&P right-of-way crosses the property. The presence of this right-of-way is a very viable corridor through Wallingford for wildlife. This conservation easement supports our efforts to encourage wildlife habitat and the rural beauty of Wallingford. The Rancourts have been dedicated stewards of open space and seek our assistance to make their property a continuing refuge for natural beauty. This declaration outlines the Rancourts' self-imposed restrictions with respect to their property. Any future owner of the property will be bound by these restrictions. The only decision for the town council is to decide if the town should accept the restrictions in the town's favor. The town would have the limited right to access the property with the owner's consent in order to determine compliance with the restrictions. In the event of non-compliance, the town would have the right to enforce the restrictions in court. The Rancourts are expected to attend the council meeting, and I believe they are here sitting front and center. This office strongly recommends the acceptance of the declaration. The Rancourts deserve our thanks for their commitment to permanently preserve this beautiful land. And attached to the letter is the declaration, which is approximately 6 pages. More than that. No, 7 pages. And would the declaration be recorded on the land records and
Yes.
become in the chain of title for everyone to see?
Yes.
Okay. All righty, questions from the council. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, you probably have the institutional knowledge. Has anybody else done this with the town before?
I'm not aware of any other example.
Certainly nothing self-imposed. I mean, there is no obligation on their part. This is something that they wish to accomplish. We have similar, some types of conservation easements dealing with land use boards, but, excuse me, this is a self-imposed restriction, and, using the town as the entity that would be the one to enforce it going forward forever and a day. I mean, obviously, the town of Wallingford should be here for quite some time, so that would be the likely entity. And the Rancourts approached the town about doing that, and we've worked with them to accomplish that.
Thank you. And I've been involved in Durham. They've had similar things, but I thought this was the first time that I had heard of this. So
I think so. I think
it's
they're a wonderful family for doing this.
Yeah, very commendable. And I just wanted to say thank you. And I appreciate it, and I'm sure that our public appreciates it. And I see members of our Conservation Commission here, and I'll give the opportunity. Trails Day is June 2nd at Fresh Meadows. But I just want to thank the Rancourts for their very generous, essentially, gift here tonight. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments from the council? Comments or questions from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein.
Absolutely, yes.
Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
Mr. Chairman, I support this, but the Rancourts and I are related, so I need to abstain.
Noted.
Thank you. Marone.
Yes.
Morgenstein.
Yes.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
And the motion passes.
Well, thank you very much. On to item 6, the public question and answer period. There appears to be no grist for that mill.
Yes, there is.
Oh, did you sneak up on me?
You did.
I was looking around, I didn't see you move. Mr. Ross, name and address for the record, please.
Ray Ross, Silver Pond Apartments. I know it's an age-old question, but the bridge over Brook on Center Street, where are we?
We're
There has
watching,
been no work done on it
we're
for,
watching molasses move.
yes,
I
grass
can-
grow or,
Yeah, I can inquire of the engineering department what their latest report is from the state, but it's a state project, as you know.
right, thank you, because it hasn't been touched in months and months, and it's starting to deteriorate, the barriers and the lights, the pole is falling down. It's starting to get in sad shape. Thank you.
I drive by it almost as often as you do.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Mr. Chardullo.
Paul Chardillo, 2 Bayberry Drive. Am I correct in stating that the budget process for this fiscal year is still available? In other words, last meeting, at the budget meeting, the council rejected the revenue budget, and apparently that meant that they had rejected it. So my expectation was that you would continue to be able to work that. There's no particular deadline in the charter that says that you can't. In other words, you've got the tax implemented in July, but there's no reason that I can see in the charter that the council, if they decided to make changes, could go ahead and do that. Is that a correct statement?
No, it's not. No, according to the charter, the budget process starts with the mayor presenting the budgets to us April 1st, and then we have until the second Tuesday in May to either adopt a council budget, and if we don't, then the mayor's budget is adopted by default.
But there's no timing in there.
Yes, there is. It specifically refers to the second Tuesday in May.
Aren't we here tonight to make a change to the budget?
It's
Proposed change?
it's quite a unique circumstance that brings us here
Understood.
tonight.
But you can do it. I mean, I'm not saying it's not unique, I'm just saying that.
I trust that if you will stay for this item on the agenda, and you will hear an opinion from the law department on the council's ability to act on the budget.
Okay.
And
All right. I guess I would simply say, I'll leave it at that. Again, this is another issue that I can't say that I agree with the town in its charter, and I'll be interested in hear what the legal interpretation is. But it seems to me that the council, as the primary legislative body, you create ordinance, you approve budgets, the term has been used, quote unquote, board of directors for the town. I find it difficult to believe that if there was sufficient votes on the council, let's say a 7 vote, which you'd need for an override if the mayor didn't support it, that someone could make a recommendation to, let's say, add to what I think is going to be discussed later on, and maybe eliminate that entire tax increase. Because in thinking back over the process, it seemed to me that there's a majority on the council. There was a little confusion through the process, but I felt, I mean, certainly based on the votes, there's a desire on the part of the majority of the council members to not have this tax increase. And we simply, the wheels ceased when you defeated the revenue. And I don't think that's appropriate, and I think you should consider, certainly the members of the council, any member of the council, should consider, and if you certainly feel strong enough, to add things that need to be changed or cut to perhaps eliminate that, the tax increase. So The second point I want to make, because there were 2 points. At that same meeting, as you recall, the mayor acknowledged that he is responsible to submit an accurate estimate of the current fiscal year as part of his submission. He acknowledged that, and I certainly agree with that. Now, having said that, in terms of an opportunity, if you look at the forecast, I have a question, I guess it's for the mayor. Mr. Mayor, given that the estimate you submitted for this fiscal year is your best estimate, how do you justify a 5% increase in this year's performance over this last fiscal year that ended last June? I mean, how do you come to that number?
I don't understand your question. What's the 5% increase?
Well, the 5% increase is the expected expenditures for this year over last year. 5%.
That's developed with a review of what we expect in the way of salaries and the costs across the board in order to provide services.
Okay. Well, I find it very hard to accept that this is your best estimate because, as I said, it represents a $7.6 million increase this year over last year. And if you look at the historical average, at least as far back as I can find it, the average is less than half of that. And the most we've ever grown the budget in 1 year is slightly under 4 million. And yet you're saying that we're going to end up at 7.6 million. If you break those numbers down, the 5%, 2.6 of it comes from the education budget. 9% comes from the general government budget. So that's not very credible. Another piece of good information that's available to all of us, I just read the monthly report from the controller, and I would like to commend the controller for this report because it had a summary, something that we've been asking for a while, of expenses. And what it shows is that through the first 10 months of this year, we only got 2 months left, we're under that budget by 9%. That's $15 million. So unless somehow we're going to overspend in the next 2 months by $15 million, I think we're going to end up with another very large surplus. If you further look at the general government budget, the individual departments and the accounts, 26 of the 39, which is a big number, have underspent, some of them very substantially. So again, personal view is we're going to end up with another surplus. So I encourage, and I direct this at the individual members of the council. I think any one of you has the ability and the authority vested in you by the votes you've received by residents to bring forward additional changes and push the idea that you get that on the agenda and take a vote. If you don't have the votes, it doesn't happen, but don't allow yourself to be the door to be slammed in your face on what could be termed a technicality where there's a difference of opinion as it relates to the charter. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? There appearing to be none, I close the public question and answer period. We move on to item number 7.
I move we approve a transfer in the amount of $3.4 million from appropriation from cash to treatment plant structures from the sewer division.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Good evening, gentlemen. Please remind us who you are for the record.
Good evening, Rick Hendershot, Director of Public Utilities.
Bill Phelan, Office Manager, Water and Sewer Division.
Thank you. What do you have for us tonight?
Well, we appreciate the opportunity to present this proposed budget amendment as described in tonight's agenda item number 7. We're here this evening to request council approval of proposed budget amendment of $3.4 million within the sewer division budget. Specifically, we are seeking approval to move funds from retained earnings or cash to the sewer division capital account for treatment plant structures. In summary, the need for this transfer is to enable the sewer division to begin to pay its engineering consultant, AECom, for their work on the design and bid phase of the phosphorus treatment upgrade at the Wallingford wastewater treatment plant. We are here now with this budget amendment request because it was just on May 14 that the town and the sewer division received formal notice from the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection that AECom's scope and cost submittals had been approved. The PUC then held a special meeting on May 17 to consider and approve this budget amendment pending final approval by the town council. So that the sewer division may remain able to achieve the goal of having a construction contract in place by June 30, 2019 for the phosphorus treatment upgrade and related facilities, it is imperative that AECom begin the design and bid phase as soon as possible. This council will recall that earlier this year, they approved awarding a bid waiver, hesitate to mention that at this time, but it is true, for AECom to perform this work. With funding authorization in place via this requested budget amendment, AECom will be able to begin working on the design and bid phase. I believe that all of you have copies of Water and Sewer Division's General Manager Amwake's memorandum to me dated May 15, along with several attachments, including a copy of the design services scope of work, and the sewer division's financial information as it relates to this budget amendment. At least I hope you do. With that, Mr. Phelan and I are available to address any questions you may have.
Questions from the council? Councilor Morgenstein.
Hi, the only question that I have is with regard to the state grant money. Has that come through? There was talk of us being late to the game to get some grant money from the state.
Well, we're not eligible for it until till we have a construction contract in place.
So we
Well,
won't
let me
be-
take that back.
Okay.
If Mr. Amwake were here, he'd wax long and nostalgic for the next 10 or 15 minutes. I'll try not to. But there's a variety of thresholds. If we have a construction contract in place by June 30, 19, we are available. The maximum amount of grant money should be available. Painting with a broad brush is 50% on all items associated with the phosphorus removal itself, 30% on certain other items, and 20% on certain other items. It's already anticipated that the blended grant rate for the project will be 42%. The remainder will be financed through the state at a 2% loan for 20 years.
Okay, yeah, no, I just wanted to be sure, so we're still on target. I certainly support this happening. Thank you.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen. I just want to center on the procedure. So we just adopted your budget upon the mayor's recommendation.
You mean the 18-19 budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're looking to modify that budget or the present
The
budget?
current budget, the 17-18 budget.
Okay. So we're doing like we normally do. We're modifying the budget based upon your request, not with the mayor as the gatekeeper, you as the department head. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the council? Questions or comments from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
Yes.
Marone.
Yes.
Morgenstein.
Yes?
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes?
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. On to item 8.
Mr. Bose, on the first item, we're talking about changing the revenue side and then one of the expenses. I was just wondering if there was a specific way you'd like that motion worded to make sure that we cover it.
I apologize. I think I missed almost everything you said, Tom.
Oh, okay.
Please remember, I'm like 2/3 deaf in my left
That's
ear.
okay.
Unfortunately, I got to turn to.
Is there a specific way you need or want this motion made to adjust the budgeting? Not the mill rate one yet, just the budgeting.
I would just do the simple to reduce the amount of the current taxes by that 2.4 million and change, and at the same time to increase the state grant revenue ECS for the same amount. That would be
Okay.
a great motion.
No, that one came out. We got a new letter.
Oh. Okay. All right. I'm going to move that we adjust the town revenue and the taxes by 2.4, I'm going to read the whole number, $2,453,417.
And accept an addition. And accept an additional.
A very simplified way of putting it. Is that how we want?
Does the motion need to include accepting the state revenue?
Yes, I
No,
would
and to
make it
accept
the
the
same,
state
so that the
revenue.
motion by itself balances, yes.
Okay. And to accept the state revenue funding of the education cost sharing grant.
Moved, seconded by Councilor Shortell.
And what you're doing is you're just reallocating revenue.
Mayor?
Yeah, one thing that certainly helps support this is that the General Assembly passed legislation that prevents the governor from holding back or changing the ECS grant. That was not in place previous years. The governor is restricted. Now, obviously, the General Assembly can pass another law that would release that, but at this point, the governor is prevented from using the ECS grant to adjust what money is made available to municipalities. It doesn't mean he can't change other funds that would come to the town, but he cannot change the ECS. So that helps support our, it reassures us that the money will be there.
Councilor Laffin?
Mr. Mayor, the recommendation from your office is to adjust for the education cost sharing grant and back to that $58,000 from the health insurance, not the $411,000 from the Board of Education.
This only deals with
Just
the
the grant.
ECS, the education cost sharing. The law department is indicating that certainly we can avoid spending the $58,000, which we will do, but we can't take that out of the budget.
Great. Oh yeah, no, I'm good.
Questions, comments, Councilor Fishbein?
So, when we originally got the backup for this item, there was a letter. There's a letter with the revised item also. And I'm centering on the insurance, health insurance aspect of this. The letter from the mayor says, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right one. So the letter for item 8 says, pursuant to procedural advice from the law department, we are recommending the attached appropriation, which amends the 2018-19 budget. The amendment appropriates the 2.4 as discussed in additional state of Connecticut funding to the educational cost sharing grant revenue line and reduces 58,657 from the health insurance expenditure line, and it goes on. So the representation at that time was that the law department made that recommendation. So I get here tonight and I find out that I've got another letter that removes the health insurance aspect of this. So which one is the truth, I guess?
The one that says revised and is the later date.
So the health department never recommended reducing the health insurance expenditure?
The health department indicated that they didn't need the $58,000. At the time we discussed changing, that is, law department, I discussed changing what authority, how we would go about changing the budget given the additional money from the state, et cetera. What got lost in the process was the $58,000. I had understood that that was part of what we could adjust. Since that time, the law department has indicated, no, that is not part of what can be adjusted. And hence the revised letter and the reformatting of the change to the budget, the amendment to the budget, as well as there's a slight change to the mill rate.
So the prior representation of May 15, that the law department had recommended the reduction in the health insurance line was a miscommunication between your office and the law department. Is that fair to say?
I misunderstood, and yes.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, we'll get to other things in a little bit. So all that's before us right now is to accept the revenue, the unanticipated revenue of $2,453,417. Is that correct? That's all we're doing with this item.
Yes.
So, Mr. Bose, I sent you an email on May 9th, actually May 10th. It was the day after, and I would expect that I'm the only person who contacted you about this item, asking about the number. Could you confirm or, if appropriate, refute the above statement that we were getting that additional money? Assuming that that statement was correct, what can the town council now do to avert the imposition of what would appear to be a mostly unnecessary tax increase? And assuming that to be true, in the absence of cutting the mayor's tax increase, what does the administration intend to do with these apparently surplus funds? So that was May 10th, and I sit here almost 2 weeks later, and I haven't gotten a response. Is there a reason?
Well, the response was the mayor's first letter to you on May 15th.
Okay, so is there a reason why you didn't respond? Because as we're hearing tonight, the mayor's letter was incorrect based upon miscommunication. So I'm just concerned because, you know, I'm not only a member, an elected official, I'm also a taxpayer in this town. I mean, is that how we deal with taxpayers?
No, my assumption was you were going to get the information once we had time to analyze it, and you did. So the fact that I did not personally respond to you is probably an oversight on my part. I admit that.
Well, nobody I mean, because actually the number that I put in my email was incorrect. So
Well, we received numbers probably maybe an hour or so before I believe that email, if I remember the timing on it. And I was out for a day or so after that. Coming back to those emails, made sure we had those numbers correct from one of our consultants, the CCM group down in New Haven, and then had to kind of make haste on that Monday to get it to our agenda setting meeting on the 15th, which was last Tuesday.
So if I was just a member of the public, you would ignore that member of the public and just assume that they're going to look at the council agenda also? I'm just trying to figure, no phone call?
No, I would not. No, it's a fair question. I do thank you, Vinny, but Craig, if I have to respond to you when you're getting information 2 days later anyway, that's up to date, up to that point, I'm gonna make the bold assumption that, okay, this is the way that the town is answering my question. And if I hurt your feelings because I did not respond to you, I apologize. I'll apologize publicly.
No, my feelings are, I'm just trying to figure out the process, because from there,
There's no process, Craig. Mr. Fishbein, in all seriousness, it's, you know, the numbers came in, a couple of days later, I had a chance to look at them because I did spend some time away. The mayor, I believe, had some type of an indication of those numbers as well, and we had a day to get those double-checked to make sure that we had them for the agenda-setting meeting of the 15th, so you folks would get that in your agenda packet for this evening's meeting.
okay.
And I'm pretty sure that fulfills your questions. I mean,
Everything was in a lot of flux. In fact, some of what we waited for was a meeting of CCM, I believe that was either Monday or Tuesday, to get final figures. I had a conversation with Jim about that, and I brought back what they were saying, because, you know, you need to be certain. At that time, I was asking, what is our assurance? What is the control on this? And that's when I found out about the legislation that prevents the governor from changing it. But there are a lot of facets to this, and I think Jim was reluctant to be saying too much for certain because we weren't certain of anything at that point.
So from there, on the same day, is actually that evening, a agenda item is submitted to us, or to the chairman, by Councilor Shortell. And then there was discussions about who was going to be on the agenda item. And then somehow the mayor gets on this agenda item without any, you know, I don't understand how that happens, quite frankly. You know, I mean, to a certain extent, decorum, you know, people come up with ideas as councilors, as elected officials, and they sort of run to make it an agenda item so their name is associated with it. And I don't know how our names all come off of this. And it's now, I don't want to use the word hijack, but it's, the mayor's the only name associated.
Well, you wouldn't be the first to use the word hijack, that's okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, but, and I understand that, the procedure does reflect what the procedure is. However, you at least don't have your name associated with a letter that was an error.
I got it. But I have an email that was never responded to, so, okay, that's all that I have with this particular motion, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else on the council? From the public? Mr. Chardullo, what took you so long?
Paul Chardullo, 2 Bayberry Drive. I'd like to express my support for this agenda item. I think we should absolutely apply it to the tax cut. I also believe that we should move forward, not necessarily tonight, however, if you would like to make additional changes to get that tax increase rolled back completely. If I'm not mistaken, the item just before this one, didn't we just approve a budget amendment for the sewer division, which should answer the question?
For the current budget, we did. We approved, if you were listening.
Yeah, I was listening.
The budget amendment for the sewer division was for the 17-18 budget.
Okay, so all that means is that you permitted them to make an amendment 10 months after it was approved.
It happens all the time.
Well, okay, will you acknowledge then that the council has the ability to amend the budget?
But you're oversimplifying.
No.
Yes, you are.
How am I oversimplifying it?
Because if you read the charter, we're only empowered to do it if the initiation comes from the administration. And you're going to disagree with me.
I will go back and take a second look at it.
So we are prepared with an opinion from the law department because apparently or some people have taken issue with the way the agenda was
Well,
written.
listen, I hear what you're saying about the law department, but I have 3 issues with the charter, and I sat with the law department trying to get the input. And the feedback I got was that I couldn't get input, even though I'm a resident of the town attorney could not advise me because the town is his client. So where does that leave me as a citizen? I guess I have to go out and hire my own attorney, maybe. Whatever. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Ms. Tata?
Christina Tata, 751 North Farms Road. I just wanted to say that I find it ironic that we're discussing who would get credit for a potential tax decrease when a couple of weeks ago, 5 of the 9 of you voted to cost taxpayers $470,000 that departments said they did not need. And on that same topic, I was just wondering, is there any way at this point to get that $470,000 back, the $58,000 from, I believe, it was personnel maybe, and the $411,000 from Board of Ed? Is there anything that can be done at this point, or is that a done deal?
You're going to get an answer from the law department.
Thank you.
The opinion of the law department is that it's a done deal. You cannot get it back.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Then I bring it back to the council. Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question's for the law department. So it's the law department's opinion that we can't get the $58,000 back. How is that determined?
If the budget has been set already when you rejected the revised budget that the council had recommended you adopted through the charter, the mayor's budget was approved. And we, this afternoon, advised the mayor that he could not change that insurance item that he had been in the letter that he thereafter revised. He was advised that this afternoon. And any revision that you're going to do on the revenue side, on the mill rate, is something that the mayor has to recommend and you have to approve. It can't be done by just the mayor alone. You couldn't do it as a council alone. It takes both of you to change the revenue side and the mill rate.
And is that per charter or per state statute, or is there case law on this?
That is the opinion of the law department based upon the town charter, but we also, Attorney Small was aware that the state legislature, when it cut revenue that was going to the towns, the anticipated revenue, and that occurred after many towns had adopted their budget, specifically in that legislation permitted towns to go outside their normal budget process and to in fact reduce their budgets, and it specifically allowed it in that legislation, leading us to believe that the state legislature was also of the opinion that once towns have set their budget, it's a done deal, and that they had specific state legislation that permitted a deviation.
Okay, so let me try this another way to keep it as understandable as possible. Again, is there a specific area within the budget within our charter that addresses that we can't do this?
It is our opinion that the area of the charter that says if by the second Tuesday in May there has been no budget passed, then by default the mayor's budget is adopted. That is what the law department is basing its opinion upon.
That sounds like it could be arguable. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Morgenstein.
So a simpler way of putting the whole question. So by default, it reverted back to the mayor's budget. And in that budget was $58,000 that was not needing to be spent by the Personnel Department for health insurance. So on the expense side, you have $58,000 sitting there that we've been told is not going to be spent. Rather than an adjustment to the mill rate, is it possible to credit that to the taxpayers?
I don't, I don't know of a process that would permit that.
And is there any way to think up a process that could do that?
Well, Attorney Small spent considerable time on this, and we have both discussed it at length, and I don't believe there's any process of which we are aware. And I just looked at Attorney Small, and she agreed with that. So.
So that sits in the fund balance account and becomes additive to that part of our budget. Can we as a body say that amount, any amount, moving forward, be moved in the next budget year back to the taxpayer as we plan our next year budget?
That's what we end up.
Right. I mean, whatever amount we take from reserves will be increased by the $58,000, so it is returned to the taxpayers. It won't be spent this year, and it will be returned through the reserves we put into the budget every year.
We're going to apply a mechanism to that line item in the expense side of the budget so that the $58,000 will not be spent.
My understanding is that the Board of Ed is taking a similar tactic with the money. They're kind of saying, okay, I don't need to touch that. If the government side says we don't need to touch that, I would suggest that this body, at the beginning of our process next year, certainly no matter the state of affairs, say this is owed to the taxpayers.
Well, I
what
think
it's, what it's worth.
Speaking 20 months in advance, probably, or 18 months in advance, it's going to be hard to like see or start to, tier out if there's any surplus of funds. If our surplus, our budget surplus for the year ended, for example, June 30th, 2017, was about $300,000, $312 if I remember correctly. If that happened again this year, obviously $56,000 on the general government side would be part of that. You know what I mean? So it would be in there, it would be part of that final product. But during the year, a mechanism that we're going to utilize on the general government side to not spend that $58,000 out of that line item, that expenditure line item in the personnel budget, is going to be applied, July 1st. Unless something obviously disastrous happens and we need to transfer funds toward a...
Well, I can tell you, it will not be spent, period.
Okay, you heard him. I was trying to leave the door open to like maybe a tornado or something. Those never happen.
Thank you.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I also spent some time working on this, and, although some people fail to recognize, I did bring a package to this body to have a zero tax increase. And unfortunately that failed, and I don't know why people forget, but we can amend our budget, is my opinion. And I did look at the legislative discussions with regard to the language that Attorney Small looked at, and there was no discussion about them having to pass that because it was unwarranted. And I'll tell you that the reason why the change to item 8 happened was because I called Janice this afternoon and brought to her attention the $58,000 being in there. Otherwise, that document probably wouldn't have been revised. So my opinion comes from the Supreme Court of Connecticut, which I would expect that our lawyers here would have looked at in 1985, is the case of Tramontano, I'm sorry. Town of Southington relied upon this just 2 years ago. And the procedure in New Haven is very similar to ours. In March and April of each year, the Board of Finance is required to estimate, so the Board of Finance sits like the mayor, to estimate the amount of money necessary for the expenses of the city for the fiscal year beginning in July, as well as the rate of taxation needed to meet such expenses. Thereafter, and this is all by charter, a public hearing on the recommended budget and tax rate must be held by the Board of Aldermen, which is the next step up, which must act thereon no later than the first Monday in June, which is even later than our procedure. It goes on to say, upon the failure of the aldermen to act by the first Monday of June, the estimates, appropriations, and rate of taxation reported by the Board of Finance shall be final. It's basically the same procedure that we have here. And what happened in this case of Tramontino was they passed their budget May 12th of 1982. On May 18, they found out that they had misestimated the revenues from the state. They also found out that a utility bill for the New Haven Coliseum was $244,000 more than they had estimated. So that's more than just state revenue. And that utility bill is akin to our health insurance situation here. They also found out that a program for services to the elderly was underfunded. And thereafter, they amended their budget. In that particular case, they increased their taxes after the date indicated in their charter. And a taxpayer sued and said, you can't charge me the higher tax because the charter is a drop-dead date. What the Supreme Court said was, the fact that the revisions were made after the date set by the charter for submitting the budget to the Board of Aldermen did not deprive the Board of Finance of its power to act in fulfillment of its duty to submit a balanced budget. It goes on to say, suppose the board neglected its duty intentionally. Would not a mandamus lie to compel them to discharge it? So they would have to modify their budget. They go on to say, on previous occasions, we have held that the acts of a public official performed at a time beyond the limit prescribed are nonetheless effective. Ultimately, they say, despite the imperative shall, which is like in our charter, which is used in setting the date for submission of the Board of Finance proposal, as well as throughout Section 58 of the charter, we are persuaded that the legislature never intended that failure of the Board of Finance to comply with this time limit should nullify any subsequent action taken. That's what our Supreme Court of Connecticut has said. The town of Southington relied upon that just 2 years ago. In addition to the case, I have the legal opinion, the letter written to the town of Southington. And I'll tell you that, you know, FOI is very important to me. And I was able to get these documents because the town of Southington posts their minutes online very well, and they add attachments. I wouldn't have those documents but for that, something that we don't do here. But I have the letter from its attorney, Landolina, to the first selectman of Southington, having to do with amendments and modifications. So, you know, in this case, I think that we can amend our budget. And I gotta tell you, if we amended our budget to have a zero tax increase, as I'm gonna propose shortly, who is gonna sue? Who would have standing to sue? Who's damaged by paying less taxes? Nobody. So that being said, I'm proposing as an amendment to the motion on the table, it's in addition to. So we have the revenue that's currently the motion. I'm combining that with the health insurance of $58,657, combining that with the Board of Education, very generous give back of $411,000. I'm giving the WCI facade improvement program the $5,000 that they asked for our downtown. And then I'm taking two items out of the Public Works budget and utilizing the reserve in the cap and non-recurring that is there from projects that are done. It's unexpended, unencumbered money. We're taking $110,000. That puts us at an adjustment of $3,028,074, which my understanding from the information that we got from Mr. Bose prior to the budget situation was we needed to hit 3 million. So this should have a zero tax increase or perhaps a very slight tax decrease. And I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Your spread, if I may, Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt your vote. Thank you for the spreadsheet, Mr. Fishbein. There's a problem with it. You're adding 2.4 million from the ECS grant revenue and you're not subtracting 2.4 million out from taxes.
Well, that adjustment can be made. We had to come up with an adjustment of 3 million. And that's what that does. How we get there, you're gonna, I mean, that's 3 million. So, you know, you could adjust, you would adjust the first line, the second line because you're not expending it, the third line because the Board of Education doesn't need it. The $5,000 is already baked in, and the 110, so you're gonna take that total amount as an adjustment to taxes. It's a decrease.
I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Mayor?
I just want to point out that there's not authority to do this according to the law department. Now, I don't know if, Greg, I don't know if your recitation of what the case is that unknown? Do you change your opinion at all?
No, we haven't changed.
So there.
What is the opinion based upon? There is no, I mean, I have a copy of the case. I have a copy of the legal opinion. Do you have a case?
Read the entire case, but just using how you describe the New Haven case, you could have done all these things on the second Tuesday in May. It's unlike the New Haven case, which it came in after the fact from the way you described it, unless I'm understanding it wrong. You, the council, could have voted for all these changes the day you didn't vote to pass the budget. This is not something new since then.
Same thing
None
here.
of these things.
Same thing here. They adopted a budget. They followed their procedure and then.
Right, and then things changed.
Yeah.
These items didn't change. You could have taken away the health insurance the day you voted on the budget. You could have taken out the Board of Education funds. You could have, I don't even understand the WCI or the Public Works Fund. So, and I still have to read that New Haven case, and it sounds somewhat I'd have to read it myself, but.
I have a copy.
So comparing it to using how you described it, where things became known after they had the vote, that's not the case here. You had you had that information, you chose not to do it.
The question was whether or not we could amend our budget, and there's no.
Well,
case
I'm
that
trying to
says we
fit it
can't.
into your fact pattern of the New Haven case. I'm just saying that's one distinction. So at this point, we certainly haven't changed our position.
So your interpretation is that what we can do or what we can act upon after our budget deadline passed according to the charter is based on new information that we didn't have at the time that we passed our budget.
That's really what we're willing to go out on a limb and say, that the charter tells you that the budget's final. That's what it says. You didn't pass the budget. The charter says the mayor's budget is final and the mill rate will be set based upon that budget. So the question is then, because the state is introducing additional funds, can you add those funds in to take away from the tax implication of that? And we're willing to say, okay, although somebody could argue you can't even do that. But we're willing to say that. But the idea that you get to redo the budget, we're not willing to say that at this point in time. We're not willing to say that you have the authority to do that. The example in the 2006, when the state of Connecticut passed the budget in 2016, several towns had already passed their budgets. The state budget gave them less money. So the state, in the law itself, gave them the authority to adjust their budgets only to the extent that they reduced state funding, not beyond that, not a total redo of the budget. They had to follow the same budget procedure. It had to be done by June 30th, and they could only reduce the Board of Ed if monies for the Board of Ed were in fact reduced, and only by the amount that they reduced it. So the state law recognized that if they didn't give you permission to do this, you had no authority to do that because no one's charter provides for such thing. That's kind of what we've been wrestling with as to what the extent of what you can do is. You had an opportunity to remove these things from the budget, you chose not to. So the budget became final. So that's kind of why we're working to give you the opportunity to pull the new state money into the budget so you can reduce the tax liability. But we're not saying that you have authority to redo the whole budget. We're just not saying that.
So, am I still up?
You can finish.
Okay, thank you. So the case goes on to talk about time is of the essence with the use of the word shall. And because there's nothing operative that happens, that it's flexible. So, you know, once again, I don't know who's going to assert that we're doing something illegal because we're cutting taxes. I know of no law that prevents us from doing this. There's certainly no case law that prevents us from doing this. And, you know, I think it's a viable and a live motion. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Testa.
So right now, we're discussing amending the original motion.
That's correct.
Not even voting on it yet. Okay. Well, I'm kind of torn. I mean, well, I'm in favor of the amendment because then it gives us a chance to vote on this. I'm torn now whether we may or not. While it may seem counterintuitive to my decision not to support these two specific cuts a couple of weeks ago, I was also not in favor of Councilor Fishbine's original attempt to reach this bottom line number because of all of the various adjustments he was looking to make. However, now the majority of these adjustments would be the amount that we're considering in the first place here, which I can't imagine any of us would be against. So I guess I would say if this is allowable, it sounds good to me. So that's that. I'm in favor of it if we can do it all. If not, we do the original. So that's it.
Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to see us move this along. We have a motion on the floor. We also have an opinion from our law department, but we also have an opinion from the state Supreme Court. And I think that may be arguable at a different time, at a different place. I think right now it's maybe our responsibility to take action on this.
Chairman Cervoni, could I ask a question? Councilor Fishbein indicated that the Board of Education was willing to give up its money. I haven't heard that it was, and I don't know of any authority that you could just take it away from them. And as far as people having standing, which everybody's brought up the issue of standing, certainly the Board of Education would have some standing as to object to giving up money on the motion of Attorney Fishbein.
I did confer with Dr. Menzo prior to the meeting, and he stands on his representation, his good faith representation, that they do not need that money. They attempted to give it back to us, so I think that it's certainly viable, if that answers your question. Thank you.
Councilor Letourneau, you had the floor.
I sure did. Thank you. Yet again, I get hijacked. So, as I was saying, I think the legal opinions, that's for another place at another time. And I think it's time to take a vote on these motions. Thank you.
Councilor Laffin.
Thank you. If we can adjust the budget whenever we want, or with new information, what drives us then to have to do it tonight versus allowing the legal stuff to get figured out and causing a potential problem?
I think that's directed to me.
I'm asking anybody that feels like they can answer it.
I think the timing is totally ripe now in that if we were, let's say, halfway through June, we're on the precipice of the new budget going into effect, I'd totally be in agreement that you couldn't do anything. But that's why I acted upon this the day after I found out, and that's why I was a little discouraged I didn't get communication, because I wanted to, figure out, because time was of the essence then. So I don't think we can wait on this. But once again, I don't see anybody challenging it, and I think that we have Supreme Court precedent. So, but yeah, I agree. You can't do it in August. You can't do it on June 29th. But we're here. I mean, even in the New Haven case, they had their dates were even after ours. So, if that answers.
Councilor Morgenstein.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right.
Councilor Laffin's
No,
not
that's
done.
okay. And the the law department is fine with that, or you stand by you don't think it's? And would any more time with to peruse this new case open up the possibility of adjusting the opinion? I know it was presented very quickly. I just would rather, as Councilor Testa suggested, not break the law.
I never suggested that. I'm all for breaking the law. I said I'm just not sure if we could.
We have no problem of looking at the case that Councilor Fishbein brought out, but, again, time does start to be of the essence. The mill rate has to go out, the bills have to go out. At this point, we stand by our legal opinion.
Okay. And then, sorry, and Councilor Fishbein, you had said something, you acted the day after. When did you figure this out, or?
When did I figure what out? That we could do this?
Yeah.
Around May 12th, I acted on communicating with Mr. Bose the day after the legislature did what they did.
Was that a group email, or that was a separate email?
I sent it to the group.
Yeah, because I didn't see that part in there about acting on it after. I mean, I saw the excess funds part from the state.
I inquired as to what the administration was going to do, what we could do. I asked all those questions.
Yeah, but you didn't cite the New Haven case.
No, I didn't find the New Haven case till after that.
All right, well, that's what I'm asking. Because a lot of this feels like, we got handed the spreadsheet now, and the New Haven case is cited now instead of, a lot of it to me feels like you kind of joked about it earlier, ironically. You kind of wanted a gotcha credit for it instead of getting it done, which had we just given this information to everybody days ago, or as you figured out, we could have hashed this all out. I'm just, the whole thing, it just seems, I don't know.
Well,
dirty.
I did, well, I'll take the accusation at what it is. I did call Janice on my own this afternoon to ask if there was some sort of legal opinion. I was
You told me about the
proactive.
case.
No, I didn't.
I mean,
No,
you could have told me about the case.
I told you I was researching.
And I didn't know about, that's why, when you're the one who told me about the 58,000, I didn't know about it. That's why I got a hold of Jerry and we told the mayor that we did not believe that he could include that. So, I could have looked at the case, or we both could have looked at the case.
And there was quite a few emails over the past week or so about, and I have the email chain here, whether or not this was going to be a discussion item or an action item.
Yeah, but nothing about, you guys were just arguing over who was getting credit. It wasn't anything about
action item,
New Haven and all this other stuff.
Not credit.
Okay.
My last email with regard to that says, I really do not see a problem with a possible action being included until it is determined that such action cannot occur or the administration is unwilling to suggest the same. We're going back and forth about that. Not who gets credit, but how it's going to appear on the agenda item.
Look, I would love, as I would hope, you would think that everybody up here would want to decrease the taxes. We saw that wasn't the case 2 weeks ago, but I would hope that this would be possible. It looks good. I've only had it for a couple minutes, and you mentioned, we all forgot about the zero tax package you presented. We didn't forget. I thought we were polite and respectful in your attempt, and I found that more on the irresponsible side versus what you've presented here now. And I would love for this to happen. I just want to make sure that we're doing it right and not just like running into a wall repeatedly when we're being told by our law department we shouldn't be doing this. And you say, who's gonna oppose this? I mean, sometimes I think that all the time. And then yet people come up to the mic, no offense you guys, and oppose things that I or we might think are common sense. We had people coming up we had both sides, and you wouldn't think that at the school security hearing. And you would like, well, wait a minute, where are they even coming from in this? There are people out there. I just want to make sure that we've got all of our bases covered. And if we need to have a special meeting after a couple days of looking at this, then by all means, I'll be back here for a special meeting to eliminate the tax increase in its entirety instead of just dropping it down a couple mils from what we already raised it. I just don't want to do this stupidly. We already did this stupidly a couple weeks ago. I think we could just take our time.
No, he's got two projects here.
Cross all of our T's and dot all of our I's. We might have a better chance of doing this correctly. That's it for now.
Councilor Morgenstein.
I've almost forgotten. I think all I really was going to say is I am in favor of doing this. George Bush sent out people's $300 checks years ago, spent postage on it, so it kind of negated the whole thing. We should be reducing our taxpayers' bills and getting this done, and I support it.
Anything else from the council? Councilor Marone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This whole process, I agree with Councilor Laffin that this whole process does feel kind of ham-handed and kind of last minute. I only wish that the 5 members that had voted no last time had been a little more prudent when approaching the budget. And we didn't get to this point where now we're trying to take back the things that we already tried to take back the first time. So perhaps there's a lesson in here to be learned about how we approach the budget next year. And perhaps not just during budget season, but maybe this is something that has to occur, month to month, meeting to meeting, where we look at the budget every meeting. So I can't oppose this because this is, brings us to a 0% tax increase with essentially no negative to anyone, unless there's a legal reason that we can't do this. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Anyone in the public want to be heard? Councilor Tada? Ms. Tada?
Is it a promotion?
I do not have the power to do that. That was a misstatement.
Christina Tata, North Farms Road. In regards to the $400,000, or I think is it $411,000 Board of Ed, Councilor Fishbein stated that Dr. Menzo had said that he would be willing to give that back. My concern or question, I guess, is does Dr. Menzel have that authority? Would the Board of Ed need to vote on that? Because if there is, I would think if anybody were to, if we find that this is not a legal process and somebody were to consider suing, I don't know that the Board of Ed could potentially, or parents of students in the schools maybe would be upset that that money was taken away. I don't know if they would maybe urge the Board of Ed to try to get, to possibly sue. I don't think we need another lawsuit, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know, and I certainly, I know all of you know that I was fighting during budget season for a tax, either zero increase or, minimal increase. But I don't know if that's something the law department can answer. Would the Board of Ed need to vote on that?
Sure.
Thank you. Roxanne McKay, 294 Ivy Street. Actually, in fact, we did vote. We've earmarked that monies. We've put them aside. Actually, Councilor Morgenstein brought that up in terms of how, in relating back to Mr. Bose, it's going to come back to you guys, though, albeit those monies are earmarked, put aside. We are not looking to spend that money, and by virtue of having it in our contingency, it is going to go back to you folks at the end of next year. So we've earmarked that money to go back to you folks. So from our perspective, the Board of Ed's already voted to not spend that money. So.
Mr. Morgenstein.
Don't have the power to do that.
Good evening, Larry Morgenstein. I just want to say that, I know that every counselor up there goes up there at budget season with it in mind. You want to reduce or eliminate any tax increase. I would encourage you all, if the conversation continues, don't be pointing the fingers at you. Everybody took a vote in good faith up there. You thought you were doing the right thing. It's not about who gets credit. It's not about who it was silly or anything. Right now you have an opportunity, and that's what this discussion should be right now. You have an opportunity to take a vote and maybe zero it out. It's in flux. You have a legal opinion that's in question, but there's also the question is it may be perfectly legal too. So the question is you have an opportunity. So let's cut through the fingers and stuff. Take a vote.
Mr. Chardullo.
Paul Chardillo, 2 Bayberry Drive. I'd like to start by associating myself with Mr. Morgenstein's comments, and I'd like to add a couple things. One is I want to commend Councilor Fishbein. I think he's made a very good motion. I think he has done his homework, and he's done it very professionally. Third point I'd like to make is that legal opinions are important.
They don't have to reserve.
But that's what they are, opinions. The town is run and decisions are made by the mayor and the council.
Or else we have an unbalanced budget.
So I would encourage you to keep that in mind. The last point I would make is that I'd really love to see a unanimous vote on this. And I hope that this is not the end of something, but the beginning of something. Because, as I stated earlier, there's a lot of money in this town that could be allocated for better uses, rather than sitting in funds and paying cash for fire trucks, etc. But I certainly support this. Thank you.
Chair, could I point out that the chairman of the Board of Ed said that that money would not be coming back during this coming fiscal year. It would come back at the end of the fiscal year, so it'd be hard to count that money since it's still going to go to.
Thank you. Counselor Shortell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a procedural question. Just if this motion passes, but it doesn't actually happen because it's illegal, then the whole thing fails? Or what? I'm trying to understand the process. Then we lose the state money, then we have to go, what do we do then at that point?
I may be wrong, but I thought you had voted to accept the state money. No.
We haven't yet voted.
Okay.
That motion is on the table, and an amendment to that motion is on the table. The motion on the table initially is to accept the 2.4 and change, million and change from the state, and then and to reduce revenue accordingly because we're accepting that money. And then the amendment came from Councilor Fishbein to take out the 411 from the Board of Ed, the 58 from the tax, and some additional money from Public Works.
So we have to actually vote on the amendment first and then vote on the whole motion. Okay, so so my question, assuming the amendment passes, not that you should assume anything, and then now we're voting on this amended motion, yeah, what happens if?
We don't really have an opinion on that at this point. That was not something that we researched. If you pass it, we're just going to have to, research what the result is.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. I think she wanted. Roxanne?
Thank you. The only reason why I stated that it would go back at the end of next fiscal year is based on the way, we'll give it back now. We don't want the money in terms of needing it. We're just going to be stewards to hold it, frankly. It was the idea. And that was based on the direction we were given by our attorneys. If you have legal counsel or you have a desire as an entity to make that adjustment now and take that 411 from us, fine, that's fine. But our understanding is from our attorney is that we actually need to just carry that through the fiscal year and show it as that surplus, and then you would just reduce us that amount. How you want to show it from an accounting standpoint, that's fine, but we will just, our idea is we're just going to be stewards to that money. We have no intention of spending it. So if you decide legally, you folks have the ability to make this adjustment now and take that 411 at this point, that's fine for us. We're not going to do anything with that money, no matter what. So I can't speak from a legal aspect, from an accounting aspect, how you folks want to process that, but again, we'll just be stewards to it until you have the ability for us to return it to you, if that makes sense. So I appreciate, Mr. Farrell, what you heard, but that's not my intention. That wasn't the Board of Ed. And actually, I want to state for the record, the Board of Ed voted unanimously to make this decision that we don't want to use this money. And we recognize the importance for the taxpayer to retain this money to return it back. So I hope that clarifies. I don't know if anybody has any questions, I'll stay up here, but if you folks just deem it appropriate to take that 411 now, that's fine, from Board of Ed's perspective.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, thank you, Roxanne. From an accounting standpoint, it's very easy to do, obviously, just journal entries to hold funds or something like that. But from a legal aspect of it, and I just whispered this to the mayor, if you don't act on reducing or amending the Board of Ed budget by the $411,000 tonight, we basically have an unbalanced budget. So if you're going to vote tonight to do that, as Chairwoman McKay just stated, then they're not going to see that. They're going to see the budget, then they're going to see an amended budget column, which is $411,000 less. Because and that's going to allow me to reduce the current tax revenue to keep the budget in balance by that 411. In other words, and the sequestering the funds is easy. We plan to do it on our end if with the health insurance, as we discussed. But it's the legality of it today. You have to reduce their adopted budget of May 8th by amending it tonight to reduce it by 411, just like you're going to reduce the general government's by the 58,000 and change for the health insurance and the other changes as presented, I'm assuming by Mr. Fishbein. And then the corresponding reduction in tax revenue, and the budget will be legally in balance.
Will be legally in balance or will be legally imbalanced?
It would be in balance. It would be legal.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. Yeah, imbalanced. Yeah, I get you, Mr. Cervoni. I got you. No,
Well, I'm trying to avoid democracy in action versus democracy in action.
Yeah, the budget would be then in correct balance, if you allow me to change.
Thank you.
And if I may too,
Illegally balanced.
if I may impose upon the council and Mr. Fishbein to, the last couple of items for Public Works, instead of using the cap and non-recurring fund, if we don't mind changing that to using the CRRA distribution funds. It's not a really big deal, but the cap and non-recurring, we try to use for infrastructure improvements, not for vehicles per se. I don't have a problem with it going into the CRA fund at all. If you don't have a problem with that. And of course, the funds that you had planned to use from the reserves of the capital area fund are still there. I mean, they're not going anywhere. That's, if I may make that suggestion.
Councilor Fishbein, would you consider your amending?
It would achieve the same result.
Accordingly?
I would adopt it as a friendly amendment if it does not change anybody's vote. I don't want to impact.
I can't do that, but.
I know, I don't want to impact.
I understand, yeah. I understand, yeah.
I have no problem with that. When I originally proposed my zero tax increase budget on that night, I had appropriated things from that CRA fund, and that did not pass. So because that happened, I intentionally did not touch that fund.
Yeah, I understand, yeah.
When I had this.
Well, I think that night it was somewhere, I have your information upstairs, somewhere around $1 million, and I think that frightened me a little bit, to be frank. 110,000, I can certainly live with.
I guess procedurally, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this is proper. If we could poll the council as to whether or not that would impact anybody's vote?
I think we either vote or we don't vote.
Okay, so the item is as presented. I don't want to jeopardize something. I understand, but we've already been down that road, so. And that money, just so everybody understands, the $400,000 that's in cap and non-recurring is from projects that are completed, that came in under budget to the credit of the town, and that are unencumbered. So that $400,000 is sitting there, as the CRA money is as well, so.
That's correct.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor?
Yeah, I think we need time for the law department to verify whether some of this is okay. I mean, I think we need to act on the accepting of the state funds, because if it's not okay, we're spending a lot of time discussing this, and certainly I'm not going to process something that is not meeting the requirements of what the charter and state laws and whatever practices are involved.
Could we table the amendment to the next council meeting and then and act on the initial motion?
I'd suggest, maybe we'll have a special meeting, give the law department a chance to look at it. I hate to wait until that far into June, but, we could have a special meeting and look at it then, but.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mayor. Because there is a reconciliation function that must occur between the assessor's office and the tax collector's office to reconcile the grand list to what ultimately becomes what we call the tax levy. Tax levy is basically the summary of all taxes once the mill rate is put into the equations. and then some adjustments made for various exemptions that are sitting waiting to change the grand list. That function takes a couple of business days. Then we have to get that, make sure that those reconcile, and get that file electronically to our bill production company, and they pay, then they create the bills and mail them out. That takes them probably, if we wait till June 13th, or based upon council action of June 12, it's probably gonna take us pretty close, because we're gonna be way down the list on their items, on their towns. So they do 90 or so, some odd towns in Connecticut. And those bills are gonna go out probably a little later than we would want. And I don't wanna jeopardize, I'm not saying they won't go out with.
This is the reason for a special meeting and not waiting till June?
Correct.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you could wait on all of it. If we can do it as a special meeting in the next few days, then you don't have to move ahead on the first part of it.
Even if it's like the first week of June, I think that gives us plenty of time. And I don't want to represent that bills would not go out on time and they wouldn't be delivered by, we'd love to have everyone have those by June 20. We got about a 10-day window in there. If we don't get to this until June 12, assuming that everyone agrees, et cetera, and the law has rendered their decision, then we're pushing right up against June 30th.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Are we now debating a motion to table this that hasn't been made yet?
No.
We're trying to understand whether or not it's effective, an effective way to handle the whole thing.
Or even necessary.
If that.
May I make a suggestion?
You're
Yes. I've got one quick question. Can we not just make the motion contingent upon approval by the legal department? And then in a couple of days, they'll come back and say, oh, it doesn't work. We could avoid a special meeting and everything reverts back. Can we not just add that simple condition to the motion? If we're going to wait for the decision to then vote on it, why don't we just vote on it contingent upon that decision?
I don't think it's a good idea to ever pass something where you're having an issue over whether it's legal or not. I mean, that is just not good procedure. We need to be all square with what we're doing and the justification for it, then pass something, and then if it's found to be, there could be facets of it that are okay and other facets that are wrong. I mean, it's not a good thing.
Councilor Laffin.
Thank you. And to Craig's comment earlier, my issue with the original amendment from a couple weeks ago was the volume of the CRA funds. So in this case, that would make sense to me. But it was just the using a third or whatever it was of the entire account that concerned me. But not that we're supposed to be polling each other. So I kind of wanted to say what the mayor and what the kind of the discussion has just been. If we can move the whole thing to a special meeting, then that's fine. Otherwise, I was going to recommend or ask if we could approve what we had kind of planned tonight so we don't lose anything. Because I don't want to then go with the amendment and then find out that we can't do it. Now it's in the middle of June or July, and then we revert back to the mayor's full, and it just have it be a mess. I just want to make sure we do this right, and we're not jumping the gun for the sake of making a huge splash or anything like that. That would give us an opportunity to straighten out the numbers, to get all the motions written out as they should from the comptroller, as we normally do before our big budget meetings, and to have the legal options and opinions fully explored. I'm not a fan of the contingent thing, just because then we're saying we approve of this if the people in the law department think it's okay. I would rather we make the final decision based on the facts and the knowledge of what we understand the case being, not ultimately just handing it off to them, and they could, even if they can maliciously decide to accept or deny. And I would rather just kind of keep that here, because this is our one job, if we have any, is this budget our important job. So I know we have a motion for an amendment, and I don't know that it's appropriate to table the entire discussion when there's a motion for an amendment on the table.
I would entertain a motion to table the amendment, but as I see it, our options are either, and the mayor did suggest that this is a possibility, if we could call a special meeting, say early next week, and revisit the whole thing, then perhaps that might be the safest way to go. And I'm with you. I think the law department is here to advise us. I don't think they want to take on the role of voting for us. So.
Yeah, the other facet of this is we don't want to keep having to recalculate what the impact of whatever we do is the mill rate. And there's so many moving parts to this. It's that's when the errors start to occur, when we're multiple times trying to figure it with different ways. So we need to deal with it at one meeting, and at this point, why don't we, I would urge you to table it, and as soon as feasible, we'll be back together and deal with it.
Sure. Is it in order? I would then, Mr. Chairman, I move that we table agenda item number 8 to a special meeting to occur within a week, 1 week's time. Is 1 week enough?
I don't want to, I don't know what the law folks have on their work agendas, but, I mean, we're good up and through probably, June 5th, June 6th, something like that. So if that gives you another week to work out your schedules, we're still okay till about then.
Okay, I'm hearing we can look at 2 weeks.
Within 2 weeks.
Is there a second to the motion to table?
2 weeks is, within 2 weeks would be, give us enough time.
There being no second to the motion to table, that motion fails. I saw hands to my left. Councilor Marone.
Call the question?
Second.
Motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor of calling the question signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
None.
Calling the amendment.
The amendment gets called first.
Got it.
Councilor Laffin was opposed to calling the question. If you could note that, please.
What does that mean, call the amendment?
You have to vote. We're voting on Greg's
The whole
amendment.
thing,
Greg's
yeah.
amendment right now.
Yeah.
Not even.
The first roll call is on the amendment.
On the amendment, yep, let me just get it in front of me. 1 second, thank you.
We're not even approving the motion yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so on Councilor Fishbein's amendment. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
No.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
excuse me, Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
No. The motion,
The amendment passes.
yes, it does. So now we are voting on the motion as amended.
The motion as amended. Okay. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
No.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
As inconsequential as it is, a vote yes.
And the motion passes.
Mayor, do we have anything for item 9? There being no further...
Oh, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, I'm sorry, we do need to adopt a new mill rate. Mr. Bose, are you in a position to calculate that?
Just on the back of the napkin, but if we could do this at the special meeting that you call, I'd feel a little more comfortable.
There's no special meeting.
There is no special meeting.
Oh, you're not doing a
failed.
special meeting?
The
No.
tabling failed.
Mr. Chairman, may I suggest that we take a short little recess while Mr.
Thank
Bose
you.
can't
I appreciate that because I thought that went through. Thank you, Craig. I
All
appreciate
right, I call a recess.
Mr. Chairman, wait a minute. Don't we have to reduce the Board of Ed's, their budget
Wasn't that
That's
in
all part of
the
it.
in here.
motion?
It's in there.
It's part of the motion?
It's in
Okay,
your
all right.
paperwork, yeah,
It's part of that motion, okay?
yeah.
Can you take a recess and give me 10, 15, 12?
We'll take a recess.
I'll make it 10.
Wouldn't it be the mill rate?
We are in recess.
No?
No, I wanted to just recalculate it.
Call the meeting back to order. Is there a motion on the mill rate?
Mr. Chairman, I move to set the mill rate of the 2018-2019 budget to 28.61 mils.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So early on in the budget process, Councilor Shortell, in doing his due diligence, reached out to Mr. Bose with asking how much money had to be cut from this budget in order to have a zero tax increase. The response was $3 million. So what happened tonight was there was an adjustment of $3,030,000, which exceeded the representation. What we have now before us is a very tiny tax increase. And I'll be voting in favor of it because I've met my duty. As far as I'm concerned, it is a zero tax increase. I would implore the administration to perhaps take, whatever out of contingency to get us there. But, I've worked as hard as I damn well could have on this. And I'm glad to see where we are. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Councilor Letourneau?
So, Mr. Bose, with the new calculation, what would the average tax?
Yeah, I calculated that as well, $8 based upon the average residential assessed parcel increase for the year.
Okay, and that represents overall, how much are we off to get to zero?
A couple, maybe 200,000, give or take.
200,000, okay. Well, maybe that money, the mayor could find that and take that and put it in so we could hit zero, but who knows?
Let's do that. Make a motion. Take it out of contingency.
Or can we do it right now?
No.
You want to do it now? Okay. I'd be happy to make a motion on that.
You can do it.
Wouldn't mess with it.
Really?
Yeah.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we take an additional $200,000 out of contingency to be applied so that we have a zero tax increase.
Second.
Whatever contingency they want to at this point.
I'm telling you, it requires a recommendation from the administrative branch. You're going beyond what will be acceptable. Just willy-nilly take $200,000 out of contingency. Not if we want to operate government and provide the services that everyone expects. Review what you're proposing thus far, but I can tell you right now, there's no way to take $200,000 out of contingency and have a budget that makes any sense.
So we'll take it out of the CRA funds. I mean, at a point you get not discouraged, but frustrated with fighting. We're supposed to work together on this.
And we should be working together, but you're working without any recommendation for the administrative branch. Don't tell me about working together. I walk in here tonight and hear all of this for the first time. The charter stands for what it stands for. It takes administrative and legislative branches. This legislative process is fast falling into a deep chasm that makes no sense. Hey, 200,000. What's that, chump change? 200,000, take it from anywhere. No, the budget is tight, and for a good reason. We don't waste money. So all of the expenses go up, salaries, fringe benefits, all of those things go up, but we're telling the public, you can have all that without any increase in your annual budget. Is there credibility to that? I say absolutely not. And if you want to see an example of how that works, take a look at the state government and the free fall it's in. We're depending upon $2.4 million more from the state government. And guess what? That is $2.4 million they took away from us in the current year. We're not getting new money. That's money we should have had in the current year. $3 million. So, you know, we start getting into this game of all the shells, which one does have the P under it? And I'm not going to be participating in that because the result is a disservice to the people who live in this town.
As is the, you know, I've been up here 9 years, and every year this body has raised taxes. And over those 9 years, I think we've added $10 million to reserves. So we talk about disservice, it's a double-edged sword. So I'm not just willy-nilly making a motion to take it out of contingency, but when Mr. Bose left the room, and up until, I mean, I would have done the work, I've spent a lot of time on this. So, I mean, if you want to take the money from somewhere else, that's fine. If I knew coming into the room, if Mr. Bose had given us a real number, I mean, it goes back to that communication thing. Councilor Shortell asked months ago, when the budget first came out, what do we need to reach? I not only met that number, but I exceeded it. And that's where I talk about working together. So, I mean, the motion...
No, that's not working together. That's arriving at a goal that you alone seem to have. And if you want to sacrifice services, you're on the right track. Because that's what's going to happen. That's if the administrative side recommends it. And we'll find out what the town attorney's office says about that issue. But this is not the typical budget process. This is one group deciding it's just going to do whatever it wants, regardless of what the charter or legal precedent or legal opinion says. That's working together? I don't think so.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Comments from the public? Oh, you. Come on up.
No, I just wanted to point out the fact that if we had a special meeting, we could have figured out the zero number in advance. That's all. No, I'm done. Go ahead.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
I have a question.
Okay.
So we're voting on the amendment, but we can still vote on the original? Okay.
It's a new motion to
We already voted on all that.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah.
This is a new motion.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Adopting a mill rate, and doing a new
Right.
motion to change the budget again. That's what this motion.
Well, the motion,
I assume,
this is an
And the vote for the mill rate,
Chairman Cervoni, may I ask, I assume, are we voting on the motion from Councilor Fishbein right now?
that's my question.
Which I think we are.
Actually, that is a good point.
Right.
The motion was to amend the mill rate, or to set the mill rate, and that motion hadn't been voted upon, and therefore Councilor Fishbein's motion is out of order.
Okay.
No, it's an amendment to the...
No, it's not.
No, this is the
It's
mill
not. You didn't vote to change the mill rate. You voted to take $200,000 out of contingency.
Correct.
We haven't
That's
accepted.
inconsistent with the motion.
No, because the effect of doing that would modify the mill rate.
Right, we haven't voted on the mill rate yet.
It's a different motion and it's out of order.
So we'll vote on the mill rate.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, wait a second. No, no,
About wanting to work together.
I am.
Done something so.
No, because,
What you wanted to accomplish.
listen.
All right, let's have some order to the meeting.
Still gotta push and push.
Let's have some order to the meeting.
On the other side, to do something I was against 3 times before, and I said, you know what, in the spirit of getting something good done, let's go along with this suggestion. We vote on it, and you still gotta pull this crap. Just let's finish.
If you gotta go home, go.
Sorry for blowing up.
I'm here doing my job, so.
All right, so your motion's out of order.
Okay, and I'm challenging the ruling of the chair under Rule 24,
That's fine.
and that's procedurally what we would do. Yeah, appeal a decision of the chair that the motion is out of order, and so that's where we're at. Because the effect of my motion is to modify the mill rate, you can't do it afterwards. So, it's the same basic thing.
Okay. The vote on the appeal of the decision of the chair.
Do you need a second?
Is there a second on the appeal of the decision of the chair? There's no second, that fails. We're voting on the mill rate,
We're voting on the mill rate that the comptroller
calculated.
calculated.
Move to set the mill rate to 28.61 mils. Okey doke?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Fishbein,
No.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
The motion passes.
There being no further business on the agenda, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the meeting adjourned.